The night my mother threw a garbage bag at my 5-year-old daughter and told her she belonged with the trash, I finally understood that some people don't deserve the title of family. I was standing in that filthy storage room, watching my little Maya sob into my arms, her tiny body shaking with fear and cold, and something inside me that had been cracking for years finally shattered completely. If you've ever felt worthless in your own family's eyes, if you've ever been told you don't deserve basic human dignity, please stay with me. This story gets dark before it gets light, but I promise you, there is light. And if this resonates with you, please like this video, subscribe to hear more stories of survival and transformation, and comment below with your own experience. You're not alone in this. Now let me take you back to where it all began. 6 years before that horrific night, I had been engaged to Marcus from my parents' country club. Old money, right connections, everything they wanted. But then I met James, an EMT with kind eyes who treated everyone with respect. We dated in secret for 3 months. He took me to diners and free concerts, introduced me to his warm, chaotic family. With him, I could be myself without apology. When I told my parents I was calling off the engagement, my mother threw her wine glass against the wall. Waterford crystals shattered everywhere. An EMT? My father said, his face turning red. You're throwing away the Henderson family for someone who drives an ambulance? They cut me off completely when I married James anyway. No trust fund, no wedding attendance, no family. Even my childhood belongings were donated before I could get them. But I didn't care. We built a life together in a small apartment. When Maya was born 9 months later, we were broke and exhausted and overjoyed. For 3 years it worked. Then James started coming home late, smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. I found the messages to Vanessa 3 months before Maya turned 4. I'm going to leave her soon. When I confronted him, he said he was suffocating in our life. This isn't what I wanted. It's too hard. He moved in with Vanessa, who made 3 times our income and had a luxury condo downtown. The child support came sporadically, always with excuses. I moved to cheaper apartments, picked up extra shifts, but daycare ate through my paycheck. Maya kept asking why Daddy didn't visit anymore. I told her he was busy, hating the lie even as I said it. Through all of this, even when I was choosing between electricity and groceries, I never called my parents. I knew going back would mean admitting they were right, that I had thrown away security for love and ended up with neither. I couldn't give them that satisfaction. Then came that October night, 5 years after I had walked away from my family, 2 years after James had walked away from me. I had just finished a brutal 12-hour shift in the emergency room. A multi-car pileup on the interstate had brought in more patients than we could handle. I had held the hand of a dying teenager while we waited for the trauma surgeon. I had helped pull glass shards from a woman's face while she screamed for her children who had been taken to a different hospital. I had done chest compressions until my arms shook and my scrubs were soaked with sweat. When my shift finally ended at 7 p.m., all I wanted was to go home, hug my daughter, and sleep for 12 hours straight. Maya was with my neighbor David, a firefighter who lived across the hall and often watched her when my shifts ran long. He had become our guardian angel over the past year, never accepting payment, always bringing over leftovers from the firehouse, fixing things in our apartment that our landlord ignored. He was one of those genuinely good people who help simply because they can, not because they want something in return. When I picked up Maya, she was full of stories about the pancakes David had made for dinner and the firehouse coloring book he had given her. She fell asleep in the car on the drive home, exhausted from running around with his dog all afternoon. I carried her into our apartment building, fumbling with my keys, already mentally planning the quickest dinner I could make before collapsing into bed. I pushed open our apartment door, and immediately my foot splashed into water. Cold water, already an inch deep in the hallway. I heard Maya stir in my arms and wake up. "Mommy, what is that?" she asked sleepily. I didn't know yet. I stepped inside, my shoes squelching, and that's when I heard it. a sound like rain, but coming from inside our apartment. I rushed to Maya's bedroom and my heart stopped. The ceiling had collapsed. Not just a crack or a leak, but a complete collapse. Chunks of plaster and wood hung down like broken teeth. Water was pouring through the hole, a steady stream that had already created a pond on her floor. Her bed was soaked, her toys were floating, the walls were dark with water damage. I stood in the doorway, still holding Maya, and felt something break inside me. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind of breaking. Just a slow, tired cracking, like ice giving way under too much weight. This was too much. After everything, this was just too much. The landlord, when I finally got him on the phone, was sympathetic but useless. "Pipe burst in the unit above you," he explained. "Old building, old pipes. It happens. I'll get someone out there tomorrow to assess the damage, but you can't stay there tonight. The water's getting into the electrical system. It's not safe. Where am I supposed to go?" I asked. "How long until we can come back?" He hesitated. "With the damage I'm seeing, and the inspection we'll need, and the repairs, you're looking at minimum 2 weeks, maybe 3. I'm real sorry, Sarah. I know you've been a good tenant, but I don't have any other units available right now." I hung up and just stood there in the water, watching it lap against the baseboards. Maya was quiet in my arms, her hand clutching my scrub top, sensing that something was very wrong even if she didn't understand what. My phone showed it was 8:30 p.m. I had $342 in my checking account. I had no credit cards because I had maxed them all out during the divorce. I had no savings because every spare dollar went to keeping us afloat. I started making calls. Monica first, my best friend from nursing school who had been my lifeline through everything. She answered on the second ring, and when I explained what happened, I heard the genuine distress in her voice. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. If I was in town, I would come get you right now. But I'm in Ohio with my mom. She just had surgery. I won't be back for at least a week." David, my neighbor. But he had just started a 72-hour shift at the firehouse and wouldn't be home until Thursday. I called my coworker Lisa, who had helped me out before. She answered, crying. Her sister had just shown up on her doorstep, fleeing an abusive husband, with 3 kids in tow. Her apartment was already overcrowded. There was no room. I called 5 more people. A friend from Maya's preschool, a nurse I had trained with, the woman from the coffee shop who always remembered my order and asked about Maya. Everyone had a reason they couldn't help. The reasons were all valid, all real. People have their own problems, their own lives that are already full to bursting. I didn't blame any of them. But with each sorry, with each I wish I could, I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. I looked at my call list. There was only one name I hadn't tried. One contact I had kept all these years, updated with their new number even though I never called it. Mom's cell. My finger hovered over it for a long time. Long enough for Maya to ask, "Mommy, who are you calling?" Long enough for me to think through every possible outcome, every different way this could go wrong. But what choice did I have? I pressed call. She answered on the 4th ring. Her voice was exactly as I remembered. Cool, controlled, with that particular clip that told you she had been interrupted doing something more important. "Hello?" "Mom," I said. My voice cracked on the word and I hated myself for it. "It's Sarah." Silence. A long silence that stretched so thin I thought the call had dropped. Then I can see that from my caller ID. "What do you want?" Not "how are you?" Not "I've missed you." Not "is everything okay?" Just "what do you want?" As if I was a telemarketer, an annoyance, someone whose time she was only giving out of obligation. I explained the situation. The burst pipe, the collapsed ceiling, the fact that I had nowhere to go and no money for a hotel. With every word, I felt smaller, like I was shrinking back into the child who could never quite measure up to expectations. I hated that she could still make me feel this way after 6 years of no contact. I hated that I needed her help. I hated the desperation in my own voice. When I finished, there was another long pause. I could hear muffled conversation, her hand over the phone as she talked to someone else. Then she came back on. "Fine," she said. "You can come here. Tonight only. Just until you figure something else out. But Sarah, if you show up at my door, you follow my rules. This is my house. You're here as a guest, and not a particularly welcome one. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Thank you." She hung up without saying goodbye. I stood there, with the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dead air, feeling tears prick at my eyes. Maya tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, where are we going?" "To Grandma's house," I said, forcing a smile. "You're going to meet my mom and dad. Are they nice?" she asked, with the innocent hope of a 5-year-old who still believed all grandparents were like the ones in storybooks, who baked cookies and gave hugs and told stories. I didn't know how to answer that. So I just said, "Get your raincoat, sweetie. We need to go." The drive to my childhood home took 45 minutes through the rain. It had started pouring while we were inside the flooded apartment, and now the roads were slick and dangerous. My windshield wipers could barely keep up with the deluge. Cars had their hazard lights on, crawling at half the speed limit. Maya had fallen asleep again in the back seat, her raincoat still on, hugging her stuffed rabbit that we had managed to grab from the wreckage of her room. I took the exit into my parents' neighborhood and felt my chest tighten. Nothing had changed. The same massive houses set back from the street behind gates and manicured lawns. The same luxury cars in the driveways. The same overwhelming sense that I didn't belong here, had never belonged here, would never belong here no matter how hard I tried. This was a world that valued appearances over authenticity, wealth over warmth, status over substance. I pulled up to the gate in front of my parents' house and had to press the intercom button like a stranger. The gate buzzed open without anyone speaking to me. I drove up the long, circular driveway, past the fountain my mother had insisted on installing, past the rose garden she hired a team to maintain. The house loomed in front of me, all columns and symmetry and cold perfection. Every window glowed with warm golden light, but somehow the overall effect was anything but welcoming. I parked and just sat in the car for a moment, trying to gather my courage. The rain hammered on the roof. Maya stirred. "Mommy? Are we here?" "We're here," I confirmed. I helped her out of the car, grabbed the small bag I had hastily packed with our essentials, and walked up to the front door. My hand shook as I reached for the doorbell. I felt like I was 5 years old again, coming home after breaking a vase, knowing I was about to be punished. The door opened before I could press the button. My mother stood there, backlit by the chandelier in the foyer. She looked exactly the same. Perfect silver hair in a bob that probably cost more than my monthly rent to maintain. A cream silk blouse with pearl buttons, tailored black pants, tasteful jewelry. Her makeup was flawless even though it was past 9 p.m. She looked like she had just stepped out of the society pages of a magazine. Her eyes swept over me, taking in my soaked scrubs, my hair in a messy ponytail, my face bare of makeup and lined with exhaustion. Then her gaze dropped to Maya, who was pressed against my leg, suddenly shy in the presence of this grandmother she had never met. I watched my mother's expression, searching for any warmth, any recognition that this was her granddaughter. I saw nothing. Not love, not curiosity, not even basic interest. Just a cold assessment, like she was evaluating a piece of furniture to determine if it was worth bringing into her house. "Well," she said finally, "I suppose you should come in before you track water everywhere." She stepped back, not offering to help with our bag, not reaching out to greet Maya, not making any gesture that might be construed as welcoming. We stepped into the foyer and I was immediately transported back in time. Everything was the same. The marble floors that showed every footprint and had to be cleaned daily. The antique console table with the Chinese vase that cost more than some people's cars. The massive mirror in the gilded frame. The smell of the expensive candles my mother always burned, something like vanilla and jasmine that was supposed to be calming but always made me feel tense. "Take off your shoes," my mother said, gesturing to the mat by the door. I don't want water on the floors. We did as we were told, leaving our wet shoes in a neat line. Maya's light-up sneakers looked pathetically small next to my practical nursing clogs. My mother turned and walked into the house without checking to see if we were following. We hurried after her, Maya's hand gripping mine tightly. The living room was exactly as I remembered. White furniture that no one was actually allowed to sit on. Glass coffee tables that showed every fingerprint. Modern art on the walls that cost a fortune and looked like something a toddler could have made. And there, sitting in his leather recliner, was my father. He was watching the news on the massive television, a glass of scotch in his hand. He didn't look up when we entered, not even a glance in our direction. "Richard," my mother said, "our guests are here." He finally turned his head, looked at me for approximately 3 seconds, then turned back to the television. "Make sure they don't touch anything," was all he said. My mother's lips thinned. "Jessica and Mark are in the sitting room," she said to me. "Your father and I were about to have dinner. We already ate, but there's some leftover pot roast in the refrigerator if you're hungry." The way she said it made it clear this was not an invitation. This was information being provided, nothing more. I wasn't hungry anyway. My stomach was in knots. All I wanted was to get Maya settled somewhere safe so she could sleep. But first, apparently, we had to run the gauntlet of family judgment. My mother led us to the sitting room, a smaller, slightly less formal space at the back of the house. Jessica was there, perched on a love seat with her husband Mark. They were both holding wine glasses, the expensive crystal kind that my mother collected. Jessica looked up when we entered, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe, or discomfort. But it vanished quickly, replaced by a carefully constructed expression of mild interest. Well, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Look who decided to come crawling back." "Hello, Jessica," I said evenly. "It's been a while. 6 years," she confirmed. She took a sip of her wine, her eyes never leaving my face. "You look tired." "Motherhood not agreeing with you?" Mark laughed, a sharp bark of sound. "From the looks of it, nothing's been agreeing with her." He made a show of looking me up and down. "What happened? Your husband finally wise up and leave you?" My hands clenched at my sides. Maya pressed closer to me, sensing the hostility even if she didn't understand the words. "He's not in the picture anymore," I said shortly. "Shocking," Jessica said. "Who could have seen that coming?" "Oh wait, literally everyone. Mom and Dad told you that you were making a mistake, but you just had to prove how independent and enlightened you were. How did that work out for you?" My mother cleared her throat. "That's enough, Jessica." She turned to me. "Follow me. I'll show you where you'll be staying." She led us down a hallway I didn't recognize. They had renovated since I left, expanded the house, added on. We passed the formal dining room, the library, my father's office, my mother's craft room where she never actually crafted anything but stored her expensive supplies. We kept walking, deeper and deeper into the house, until we were in a part I had never seen before. A newer addition, clearly, with cheaper finishes and lower ceilings. The servants' quarters, I realized. This was where the housekeeper had her room, where the gardener sometimes stayed if he was working late. At the very end of the hall, my mother opened a door and turned on the light. It was a storage room, not even pretending to be anything else. Concrete floor, no windows, metal shelving units lined with boxes and bins, Christmas decorations, Halloween props, old tax documents, broken furniture they hadn't gotten around to throwing away. In the middle of the floor, someone had tossed 2 thin sleeping bags. "Here," my mother said, as if she was showing me a 5-star hotel room. "You can sleep here tonight." I stared at the space, unable to process what I was seeing. "This is the storage room," I said stupidly. "Yes," she agreed. "Did you expect the guest suite? That's for actual guests. Sarah, people we invite, people we want here. You're here because I'm a good Christian woman who believes in charity. But let's not pretend this is a happy family reunion. This is me doing my duty, nothing more," Maya whimpered. "Mommy, it's cold." She has a sleeping bag, my mother said dismissively. She'll be fine. Something in me snapped. She's 5 years old. It's barely 50 degrees in here. We just came from a flood. Her room collapsed. She's scared and cold and she needs to learn that the world isn't going to coddle her, my mother interrupted sharply. She needs to understand that when you make bad choices, there are consequences. You chose to throw away everything we gave you. You chose to marry someone beneath you. You chose to cut us out of your life. These are the consequences. You don't get to come back here and demand comfort. I opened my mouth to respond, but she had already turned and walked away. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, sharp and final. I stood there in that cold, musty storage room, holding my daughter, and felt every ounce of hope drain out of me. Maya started to cry. Not the loud, dramatic crying of a tantrum, the quiet, heartbroken crying of a child who knows something is deeply wrong. I want to go home, she sobbed into my chest. I want my bed. I want my toys. I don't like it here. I know, baby, I whispered, my own tears finally spilling over. I know. I'm so sorry. But our home is broken right now, remember? We just need to stay here one night. Just one night. Then tomorrow we'll figure something else out. I set up the sleeping bags as best I could, trying to make them look more comfortable than they were. I had Maya change into her pajamas, which were in the bag I had packed. At least they were clean and dry. I tried to arrange the sleeping bags so we could share body heat, so I could keep her warm through the night. But the concrete floor was unforgiving and the room was so cold I could see my breath. Jessica appeared in the doorway. She was holding her phone, and I realized with a sickening jolt that she was filming. She panned the camera around the room, capturing the boxes and the bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, and my daughter curled up in a sleeping bag on the floor. "Oh, this is perfect," she said with a little laugh. "Mark, you have to see this. It's like a poverty documentary, but it's my own sister." "Stop it," I said. "Jessica, please, don't." "Why not?" she asked, still filming. This is hilarious. Sarah the martyr, living her authentic life. This is what authenticity looks like, I guess. Maybe you should start a blog about it. How to live your best life in a storage room. Maya was crying harder now, scared by Jessica's laughter, confused by the cruelty in her voice. I stepped between the camera and my daughter. "Get out," I said. "Now." "Or what?" Jessica challenged. "You'll tell Mom? She's the one who put you here. She made it very clear at dinner that you're lucky to have even this." Mark appeared behind her, also holding his phone, also filming. "This is gold," he said. "My followers are going to love this. Rich people problems, you know? Sometimes your loser family members show up begging for help and you have to find creative solutions." I felt rage building in my chest, hot and wild. But what could I do? This was their house. These were my mother's rules. If I made a scene, if I fought back, they would throw us out into the rain, and I would have nowhere to go and no way to keep my daughter safe. So I did the only thing I could do. I turned my back on them, wrapped my arms around Maya, and started singing softly. A lullaby she loved, one I had sung to her since she was a baby. I sang it over and over, ignoring Jessica's commentary, ignoring Mark's laughter, ignoring everything except the need to comfort my terrified child. Eventually, they got bored and left. But I could hear them in the hallway, still laughing, still talking about us. I heard them show the videos to my parents. I heard my father say something about teaching me a lesson. I heard my mother say I had always been too soft, too emotional, too weak. Maya finally cried herself to sleep, exhausted from the day and the fear and the cold. I held her and stared at the ceiling and felt something calcify inside me. A hard, bright core of anger that I had never let myself feel before. All these years, I had told myself that my parents were just difficult, that they showed love in different ways. that they had high standards, and sometimes that came across as harsh. But this wasn't difficult. This wasn't high standards. This was cruelty. This was deliberate, calculated cruelty designed to break me down, to punish me for daring to choose my own path, to make me so desperate and grateful that I would accept any scrap of affection they deigned to throw my way. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't break. Not in the way they wanted. I gently extracted myself from Maya's arms, making sure she was still covered by both sleeping bags. Then I stood up, my body aching from the cold floor, and I took out my phone. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I knew what I needed to do. First, I took pictures. The storage room from multiple angles, the sleeping bags on the concrete, the boxes piled around us like walls, the single bare bulb, the complete absence of any comfort or warmth. Then I opened my video camera and I gently woke Maya, just enough to ask her some questions. "Sweetheart," I whispered, "I need you to tell me what happened tonight. Can you do that for Mommy?" She was groggy and confused, but she tried. Her voice was small and wavering on the recording. "Grandma said we have to sleep in the garbage room. She said I needed to learn a lesson. Aunt Jessica was laughing at us. She took pictures. Grandpa pushed you and you fell down. It was scary. Mommy, are they bad people?" That last question broke my heart. Out of the mouths of babes, sometimes children see clearly what adults work so hard to rationalize. I stopped recording and held her until she fell back asleep. Then I looked at the video, at my daughter's tear-stained face, at the innocence in her eyes as she asked if her own grandparents were bad people. I had my answer, and I knew what I had to do. I texted David. I knew he was working, but I also knew he checked his phone during breaks. The message was simple: "I'm in trouble. Need help. Not emergency, but close. At my parents' house in Belmont Heights. Can you come when your shift ends?" His response came 20 minutes later. "Shift ends at 6 a.m. I'll be there at 6:15. Address?" I sent him the address and felt a small measure of relief. 6 hours. I could survive 6 hours. Maya was asleep. I would keep watch and make sure nothing else happened tonight. And then we would leave and I would never, ever come back. I spent those hours planning. Not just how to get through the next day or week, but how to get through the rest of our lives without ever having to rely on people like my parents again. I thought about every resource available to me, every friend who might be able to help, every program designed for people in situations like mine. I made lists on my phone: domestic violence shelters, emergency assistance programs, legal aid societies. I researched my rights as a tenant, what my landlord was obligated to provide, how to force him to put us in temporary housing while our apartment was repaired. And I thought about something else, something that scared me but also felt right. I thought about going public with this, not to get revenge. Exactly. Though I would be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. But more to establish a record, to create accountability, to make sure that if my parents ever tried to claim they were innocent, if they ever tried to rewrite this history, there would be evidence. There would be proof. At 5:30 a.m., when the first gray light of dawn started to filter under the door, I heard sounds from the main house. My parents were early risers, always had been. I heard footsteps, the murmur of voices, the clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Normal morning sounds in a house that was anything but normal. At 6 a.m., I gently woke Maya. "Time to go, baby," I whispered. "Our friend David is coming to get us." "Where are we going?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "Somewhere safe," I promised. "Somewhere warm. Somewhere we're wanted." I packed up our belongings, such as they were. I folded the sleeping bags and stacked them neatly in the corner. I wanted to leave no trace of ourselves in this house, no evidence that we had ever needed their charity. My phone buzzed at 6:12, David texting that he was outside. I picked up Maya, grabbed our bag, and walked through that house one last time. My parents were in the kitchen. My mother was making coffee in her fancy espresso machine. My father was reading the newspaper, same as he had every morning of my childhood. They looked up when I walked past the doorway. "Leaving so soon?" my mother asked. There was no warmth in the question, just mild curiosity. "Yes," I said. "Thank you for letting us stay." She nodded, already turning back to her coffee. "Make sure you close the gate on your way out." That was it. No hug, no asking where I was going or how I would manage. No acknowledgement that they had just treated their daughter and granddaughter with less dignity than they would show a stray dog. Just a reminder to close the gate. I walked out the front door and saw David's truck idling in the driveway. He got out immediately, his face tight with concern. He opened the back door and helped me buckle Maya into the seat, then took our bag and put it in the bed of his truck. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw his expression change from concern to furious. "What happened?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "Not here. Let's just go." As we pulled out of the driveway, I saw someone move in one of the upstairs windows. Jessica, watching us leave. Even from a distance, I could tell she was smiling. I closed the gate behind us, as instructed, and I watched that house disappear in the rearview mirror. I had lived there for 18 years. It had never once felt like home. David drove us to his apartment and didn't ask questions until we were inside, and Maya was distracted with a cartoon. Then I told him everything. The storage room, the sleeping bags on concrete, the garbage bag my mother had thrown at Maya, though I didn't have footage of that. I told him about my father pushing me, about Jessica and Mark filming us for their entertainment, about the complete absence of any basic human compassion from people who were supposed to be my family. He listened with his jaw clenched, his hands gripping his coffee mug so hard I thought it might shatter. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Sarah, this is abuse. You know that, right? This isn't just a difficult family situation. This is abuse. Emotional abuse, definitely. Physical abuse from your father. And what they did to Maya, calling her garbage, you have bruises, probably, from hitting that floor." He was right. I hadn't even thought about it, but when I lifted my shirt, there was an ugly purple bruise blooming across my hip. Another on my elbow. David immediately pulled out his phone and took pictures. Then he called someone, a woman named Patricia, who ran a women's advocacy organization. He put the phone on speaker. "Patricia," he said, "I have a friend here who needs help. She's a single mother. She's been abused by her family. She has evidence. She has nowhere to go. Can you help?" Patricia could help. She asked me to come to her office that morning. She connected me with a lawyer named James Chen who specialized in domestic situations. She connected me with a social worker who could help Maya process what had happened. She connected me with housing resources and financial assistance programs. By the time I left her office 3 hours later, I had a plan. A real plan. Not just surviving day to day, but actually building something sustainable. James, the lawyer, was particularly interested in my evidence. He looked at the pictures, listened to the recording of Maya, examined the photos of my bruises. Then he asked a question I hadn't expected. "Do you want to file charges against your father for assault?" I hadn't thought that far. Could I even do that? "He's my father," I said uncertainly. "Which is why it's so important that you can," James replied. "Family relationships don't give people the right to assault you. What he did was illegal. You don't have to file charges if you don't want to, but you should know that you can." I thought about it, about my father's cold eyes as he pushed me, about how he'd stood over me while I lay on that floor, hurting and afraid, about how he'd felt no remorse, no guilt, nothing but irritation that I had dared to speak up. "What good would charges do?" I asked. "Will they even take me seriously?" James shrugged. "That's hard to say. Domestic violence charges, especially against wealthy defendants, can be complicated. But even if they don't prosecute, having a police report on record is valuable. It establishes a pattern, it creates documentation, and it might make your father think twice before he tries something like that again." I decided to file the report. Not because I thought anything would come of it, but because I needed to stop being silent about things that weren't my fault. I had spent 6 years protecting my parents' reputation by cutting myself out of the narrative. They had gotten to tell everyone that I was the ungrateful daughter who threw away everything they gave me. They had controlled the story. It was time I told my own version. The police officer who took my report was professional and thorough. She photographed my bruises from multiple angles. She took down Maya's statement, gentle and careful with her questions. She collected all my evidence. When she was done, she told me that the case would be reviewed by the district attorney's office, but I shouldn't expect much. Family disputes were low priority unless there was serious injury or ongoing danger. Still, I had an official report, a case number, a paper trail. Then I did something that scared me more than filing the police report. I posted about it on Facebook. I didn't use my parents' names. I was careful about that. James had advised me that naming them directly could open me up to defamation claims, even if everything I said was true, but I didn't need to use their names. The story spoke for itself. I wrote about being a single mother working as a nurse, about the burst pipe and the housing crisis, about calling family for help and being given a storage room with sleeping bags on concrete, about a 5-year-old child being told she was garbage, about being pushed to the ground by someone who should have protected me, about watching my own sister film my suffering for entertainment. I wrote about generational trauma, about how abuse doesn't always look like what we expect, about how it can hide behind expensive houses and perfect social media posts and Christmas cards with matching outfits, about how money doesn't make people good, doesn't make them kind, doesn't make them family in any way that matters. I posted the pictures, the storage room, the sleeping bags, my bruises. I didn't post the video of Maya because James advised against putting her face out there, but I quoted her. When a child asks if their grandparents are bad people, she's seeing something adults work too hard to rationalize. I used hashtags: generational abuse, toxic family, hidden homelessness, protect children, emotional abuse, chosen family. Then I hit post and immediately felt sick. What had I done? This was public. This was out there forever. My parents would see it. Jessica would see it. Everyone I had ever known would see it. I almost deleted it immediately, but David stopped me. "Leave it up," he said firmly. "You told the truth. You didn't lie. You didn't exaggerate. You just told the truth about what happened. If that makes people uncomfortable, good. They should be uncomfortable." Within an hour, I had 50 comments. Within 2 hours, 100. People I had gone to high school with. Old nursing school classmates, parents from Maya's preschool, total strangers who had seen the post shared in their community groups. The comments. By the next morning, 500. People were outraged, not just sympathetic, but angry on my behalf, angry at the cruelty, angry at the hypocrisy, angry at the idea that wealth somehow excused treating human beings like garbage. Someone started a GoFundMe. I hadn't asked for it. A woman named Sandra, who I had never met, saw my post and was moved to help. She set the goal at $5,000, writing that she wanted to help a nurse and her daughter get back on their feet after being failed by their own family. She shared it everywhere, on her Facebook, on Twitter, in local community groups. The donations started small, $20 here, $50 there, people giving what they could, leaving comments of support and encouragement. "You've got this. You're stronger than they'll ever be. Praying for you and your little girl." Then the news picked it up, not national news, but local blogs and news sites. They couldn't name my parents directly, but they could report on the story. Single mother and child treated to homeless conditions by wealthy family. Local nurse speaks out about abuse after seeking help from family. Woman files police report against father for assault during housing crisis. The articles were careful. They used phrases like allegedly and according to the complaint, but they included my quotes from the Facebook post. They mentioned the GoFundMe. They interviewed Patricia from the Advocacy Center, who spoke generally about how common it was for wealthy families to prioritize image over compassion. And that's when the story took on a life of its own. That's when it stopped being just my story and became something bigger, a conversation about how we treat the vulnerable in our society, about how family can be a source of trauma instead of support, about how money and status don't make someone a good person. The GoFundMe hit its 5,000. Your sister needed help and you laughed at her. That's disgusting. I hope you're proud of yourself. She started deleting comments as fast as they appeared. Then she made her account private. But people had taken screenshots. They shared those screenshots with their own commentary. Look at this woman living in luxury while her sister and 5-year-old niece slept on a concrete floor. Look at this woman posting about kindness and charity while filming her own family's humiliation. Then, someone who knew the family made a connection. They saw the posts. They saw Jessica's last name. They saw my parents' address listed in some public record. They put the pieces together, and suddenly it wasn't anonymous anymore. Suddenly there were comments on the news articles saying things like, "This is about the Wellstone family in Belmont Heights." Suddenly people knew. My father started getting calls. His business partners read the news. They saw the comments identifying him. One by one, they started to distance themselves. Not publicly. Not dramatically. Just quiet divestments. Deals that fell through. Partnerships that dissolved. He had built his reputation on being a family man, on traditional values, on the idea that success came from strong moral character. That image was crumbling. My mother's social circle imploded. The women she had coffee with every Tuesday suddenly had other commitments. The charity board meetings she chaired had mysteriously low attendance. When she showed up at the country club for her regular tennis match, her partners canceled. No one would say why. No one would confront her directly. But the silence was damning. And Jessica? Jessica's situation became the most complicated. Her husband, Mark, came from a family that valued reputation above almost everything else. His mother, Margaret Henderson, was one of those society matriarchs who controlled everything with an iron fist wrapped in silk gloves. When she heard about the scandal, when she saw the screenshots, when she realized that her family name was being connected to this story, she was not pleased. I know this because Jessica called me. 2 weeks after my post went viral, my phone rang with her number. I had blocked her, but she called from a different number. When I answered, she was crying. Really crying, not the manipulative tears she had used when we were children to get out of trouble. "Sarah, please," she sobbed. "You have to take down the post. You have to say it was a misunderstanding." Mark's mother is furious. She's threatening to cut him off completely if this doesn't go away. He's talking about divorce. He says I've humiliated him. "Please, I'm begging you." "I'll do anything." "Where was your compassion when Maya was crying?" I asked. My voice was ice. "Where was your empathy when she asked why you hated her?" "I didn't think it would be like this," she whispered. "I thought you would just leave and we'd never hear from you again. I didn't think you'd fight back. That's the problem," I said. "You thought I would just take it. You thought I would be too ashamed or too broken to stand up for myself. You thought you could treat me and my daughter like garbage, and there would be no consequences because there never had been before. Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry. I was awful. I know that now. But please, I'm losing everything." "No," I corrected her. "You're facing consequences. Those are two very different things. I lost everything when James left, and you couldn't be bothered to return my phone calls. I lost everything when I called Mom desperate and she put us in a storage room. You're not losing everything. You're just losing your perfect image. And you know what? Maybe that's exactly what you need to lose." She tried to say more, but I hung up. And then I blocked that number too. I was done being the family member who absorbed everyone else's bad behavior to keep the peace. I was done protecting people who had never once protected me. James, my lawyer, called with news. The district attorney's office had decided not to prosecute my father for assault. Not enough evidence of serious injury, they said. Just a family dispute. Exactly what I had expected. But James had another suggestion. A civil restraining order. We could go to family court and request a protection order based on the pattern of abuse, the assault, the emotional harm to Maya. It wouldn't result in criminal charges, but it would legally prevent them from contacting us. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds before saying yes, not because I thought they would try to contact us, but because I wanted it documented. I wanted a judge to look at the evidence and acknowledge that what happened was real, was harmful, was not acceptable. I wanted something official that said, "These people hurt you and they're not allowed to do it anymore." The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, life continued in unexpected ways. The GoFundMe reached $40,000. $40,000 from people who believed in my story, who wanted to help, who saw in me a reflection of their own struggles against family systems that were supposed to love them but didn't. I used some of the money to pay off debts I had accumulated during my marriage and divorce. Medical bills, credit card balances. The money I owed David for groceries and utilities from all the times he had covered me. He didn't want to take it, but I insisted. "You've done so much for us," I told him. "Please let me do this one thing." Then I found an apartment. Not in the old neighborhood where memories of James and our failed marriage haunted every corner. Not anywhere near my parents' part of the city. A completely new area, a fresh start. It was in a safe building with good schools nearby, 2 bedrooms, a small balcony, a building playground where Maya could make friends. The day we moved in, David helped carry our boxes. Maya was so excited she could barely contain herself. She ran from room to room, declaring that this was her favorite place ever. When she saw her new bedroom, painted a soft purple with her new bed and new toys and new stuffed animals, she burst into tears. Happy tears this time. "I have a real room," she said, wonder in her voice. "A real room with a real bed and nobody's going to call me garbage." I held her while she cried and I made her a promise. "Nobody is ever going to treat you that way again. Not while I'm alive. You're precious and valued and loved, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to be in your life." The restraining order hearing was surprisingly straightforward. I came with James and all my evidence. My parents came with their expensive lawyer who tried to paint me as vindictive and unstable, but they couldn't explain away the pictures. They couldn't explain away the recording of Maya. They couldn't explain away the police report. The judge was a black woman in her 60s who looked like she had seen everything twice and wasn't impressed by anything. She listened to both sides. Then she asked my parents directly if they denied the events as described. My mother tried to say it wasn't as bad as I made it sound, that I was being overly dramatic, that they had given us shelter when we had nowhere else to go. "You put them in a storage room," the judge said flatly. "On concrete. With thin sleeping bags. In October. That's not shelter. That's punishment." "We didn't think it would be a problem for just one night," my mother said stiffly. "Did you offer them a proper guest room?" the judge asked. Silence. "Did you offer them warm blankets or beds?" More silence. The judge granted the restraining order. 3 years. No contact whatsoever. If my par, even the country club, where she had been a member for 30 years, became uncomfortable. People were polite but distant. She started spending more time at home, alone, bitter about how the world had turned against her for no reason she could understand. She never, not once, acknowledged that she had done anything wrong. Jessica and Mark divorced after 18 months of trying to salvage things. Margaret Henderson never forgave the scandal. She made it clear that Jessica would never be fully accepted into the family, and without that acceptance, Mark couldn't justify staying in the marriage. He remarried within a year, someone from his mother's social circle who came pre-approved. Jessica had to get a job for the first time in her adult life. I heard she's working in retail, maybe as a manager somewhere. I don't know for sure. I don't follow her life. But I hope she learned something from losing everything she thought mattered. As for me and Maya, we thrived in ways I never imagined possible. With the money from GoFundMe, I had breathing room for the first time in years. I could focus on my work without the constant panic about making rent. I enrolled in an online nurse practitioner program, something I had always wanted to do but never had the resources for. The program was challenging, but I loved it. After years of just surviving, I was finally growing again. Maya started seeing a child psychologist. At first, I worried it would be traumatic, making her relive what happened. But her therapist was wonderful. She used play therapy and art therapy to help Maya process her feelings. She helped my daughter understand that what happened wasn't her fault, that she didn't deserve to be treated that way, that families are supposed to make you feel safe and loved. After 6 months of therapy, Maya drew me a picture. It showed our apartment building with flowers blooming everywhere. There were stick figures of her, me, and David holding hands. The sun was shining. Everyone was smiling. At the bottom she had written in her careful handwriting, "My real family." David and I didn't rush into anything. We were both careful, both aware that Maya had already been through enough disruption. But over months of dinners and movie nights and homework, help and park visits, something grew between us that felt different from anything I had experienced before. It wasn't the passionate, all-consuming love I had felt for James. It was steadier, warmer, built on friendship and respect and shared values. He proposed on Maya's 7th birthday. We were at the park having her party, surrounded by her friends from school and their parents and a few of our neighbors. When the kids were playing on the playground, he got down on one knee and asked if I would marry him. Not with a dramatic speech or elaborate gesture, just a simple question. "Sarah, you're my best friend and I love you and Maya more than anything. Will you marry me?" I said yes. Maya, watching from the top of the slide, cheered so loud that all the other kids stopped playing to see what was happening. Then they all cheered too, even though most of them didn't really understand what was going on. It was perfect in its simplicity, in its authenticity, in the way it celebrated love without needing to prove anything to anyone. We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony at the courthouse, just like my first wedding, but this time the smallness was a choice rather than a rejection. This time we were surrounded by people who had chosen to be there. David's family, all of them, filling the room with their warmth and chaos and genuine happiness. My coworkers, Maya's teacher, Patricia from the Advocacy Center, Sandra, who had started the GoFundMe and had become a real friend, people who had shown up for us when we needed it most. There were no photographs on social media, no wedding hashtags, no $1,000 dresses or elaborate centerpieces, just 2 people who had found each other in the wreckage of their previous lives, promising to build something better together. Just a little girl in a purple dress getting to see her mother happy and loved. I graduated from my nurse practitioner program a year after the wedding. At the ceremony, David and Maya sat in the front row holding a homemade sign that said, "We're proud of you, Mom." I walked across that stage to receive my diploma and I thought about how far I had come. From that storage room where I had nothing and nobody, to this moment where I had everything that mattered. I took a job at a community health clinic in an underserved neighborhood. The pay was less than I could have made in a private practice, but the work felt meaningful in a way nothing else had. I saw patients who reminded me of myself, single mothers trying to keep their heads above water, people who had been failed by the systems that were supposed to protect them, people who needed someone to see them as human beings worthy of compassion and care. Maya is 9 now. She's funny and smart and fiercely protective of people she loves. She doesn't remember much about that night in the storage room, or if she does, she doesn't talk about it. Her therapist says that's normal, that children often compartmentalize trauma when they feel safe and loved. She calls David Dad and his parents Grandma and Grandpa and talks about her aunts and uncles and cousins like they've always been part of her life. Because they have been, in all the ways that matter. She asks about my parents sometimes. Why don't we see them? Are they still alive? I answer honestly but simply. They're alive, but they're not in our lives anymore. Sometimes people who are supposed to love us don't know how, and when that happens, we have to love ourselves enough to walk away. She seems to understand this in the way children do, accepting it as just another fact about the world. I saw my mother once, about 2 years after the restraining order. I was at the grocery store with Maya, both of us in sweats and messy ponytails, doing our weekly shopping. I turned down the cereal aisle and there she was. For a moment, we just stared at each other. She looked older, thinner. Her hair was still perfect, her clothes still expensive, but something in her had dimmed. She opened her mouth like she might say something, but then she looked at Maya, who had grown from a 5-year-old to a 7-year-old, who was chattering about which cereal she wanted, who didn't even notice the woman watching her. My mother's face did something complicated. Regret, maybe, or grief, or just the realization of everything she had chosen to throw away. I put my arm around Maya and steered us to a different aisle. The restraining order meant she couldn't approach us, but I didn't trust her to follow rules. We finished our shopping quickly and left. In the car, Maya asked who that lady was that I had been looking at. Just someone I used to know, I said. Nobody important. And that was the truth. She wasn't important. Not anymore. She had been given chance after chance to be a grandmother, to be a mother, to be a decent human being. She had chosen cruelty every time. That was her loss, not mine. Sometimes people ask if I regret going public with my story, if I regret blowing up my family's reputation, if I regret not trying harder to fix things privately. The answer is always no. I didn't blow up anything. I simply stopped holding together something that was already destroyed. I stopped pretending that abuse was love. I stopped teaching my daughter that she should accept mistreatment from people who share her DNA. The real ending of this story happened just last month. Maya and I were decorating our apart. My 9-year-old daughter had understood something that had taken me decades to learn. Some people are so committed to their bitterness, their pride, their need to be right, that they destroy every good thing in their lives. And you can't save them. You can't fix them. You can only save yourself. So let me ask you this. Have you ever stayed in a situation that hurt you because you were afraid of what leaving would mean? Have you ever accepted less than you deserved because the people hurting you called it love? Have you ever protected someone's reputation at the expense of your own truth? If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like that garbage bag was thrown at you, metaphorically or literally, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve warmth. You deserve safety. You deserve to be valued. Drop a comment below and tell me your story, or tell me what part of this journey hit home for you. Hit that like button if you believe people can start over and build something beautiful. And subscribe because I'm going to keep sharing real stories about real people finding their way from darkness into light. You're not alone. You never were.